WWE upset over the Hulk Hogan reaction and coverage, real-life heat between CM Punk and Seth Rollins, an AEW Star May Be Done, and Tempest review of AEW Dynamite. I'm Luke Owen, your Jam That Champion, and this is the WrestleTalk News.
Support WrestleTalk!
Get exclusive bonus videos over at patreon.com/WrestleTalk.
We're going to kick off today's news with the latest follow-up on Hulk Hogan getting booed on Monday Night Raw's debut on Netflix. But first, I want to apologise to you all. I feel like I let you down yesterday with my Hulk Boogan joke. I'm your Jam That Champion. It didn't work out. You deserve better than that. Thankfully, I've got you guys to outsource better jokes to. So both and Brad had similar ideas of brother. That doesn't quite work actually. While Tallahassee 21 and Samson Loves You had the better suggestion of Terry Boulea, and the other alt had the superb edition of What You Gonna Boo, Brother? And it is to Terry Boulea that we turn to, as yesterday we covered a report from the not exactly reputable Daily Mail here in the UK that said Hogan was surprised by the negative reaction he got on the show when he came out in front of the live crowd to promote his beer. A beer that is now one of WWE's main sponsors and a beer that WWE owns a minority stake in. According to the Daily Mail, there were even talks of turning Hulk Hogan heel. The far more reliable and reputable WrestleVotes Radio, however, noted on their backstage Q&A show that we may not see Hogan again in front of a live crowd, and his appearances will be kept to pre-taped commercials for the beer or documentary interviews. The even more reliable and reputable Fightful Select have added in their report that there were plans for Hogan to make more appearances tied to the beer promotion, but this one went awry. Boy, I'll say. Sean Rossap adds, many we talked to in the company weren't happy that Hogan getting booed was a common talking point emerging from such an important night for WWE, as the crowd reaction got much of the attention from the mainstream coverage of Monday Night Raw. SRS adds that there were people within WWE that did expect him to get booed, and writes, we haven't necessarily heard that Hogan was of the belief it was due to politics, but at the very least, there was nobody we spoke to that was disillusioned enough to think that was the sole reason. As for the Daily Mail report of him turning heel, SRS's source told him that certainly wouldn't have been the original plan. We're trying to sell beer, not get a 70-year-old over any way we can. He concludes that one person in WWE told him that the company do want to keep promoting real American beer, after all they own part of the company, so may pivot to using a modern talent or legend to endorse the product instead. The highlight of Monday's Raw, outside of the great John Cena promo, for me at the very least, was the main event between Seth Rollins and CM Punk. A feud that has very much been in the pipeline since Punk came back, and one that feels like it's got a lot of real-life animosity behind it. Rollins had even called Punk a cancer in an interview a long time prior to their fantastic promo segment on Raw a couple of weeks ago, where it felt like a lot of home truths were said. But it's now time to turn to the most valuable and trustworthy of talking heads to find out what Bully Ray has to bully say. And if you think we shouldn't bully relay what Bully Ray had to bully say on this Bully Thursday, I'd probably say bully okay, but maybe Bully Ray has some good bully connections backstage in WWE. I got through that in one take. He said on Busted Open Radio, these two guys, although maintaining the utmost levels of professionalism, do not like each other to this day. Seth Rollins does not like CM Punk at all. Punk can't stand what Rollins has turned into. There is very, very real animosity. If true, it's a good example of being able to put aside personal issues to put on a great wrestling match. And speaking of excellent wrestling matches, this week's NXT New Year's Evil was a stonking show, and it paid dividends in the ratings. With 2 title matches and an appearance from The Rock, this week's NXT drew 957,000 viewers with a 0.25 in the 18 to 49 demo. It's the best demo number for the CW era. An even more impressive number as some markets aired NXT late due to coverage of the fires in Los Angeles. And before we do get into this week's AEW Dynamite review, Fightful Select are reporting that those that we spoke to in the company were of the belief that Malachi Black was finishing up with AEW if he hadn't already. Uh-oh, we're going to get another Instagram Live today, aren't we? SRS adds there has been no clarification on whether Black will be back on AEW TV, and right, to be clear, we can't say definitively that Black's contract is up, or that an option had been declined, picked up, or anything transactional. He is still listed on AEW's website and has been booked to wrestle for Coastal Championship Wrestling this weekend. And with that said, it's now time to hand on over to Tempest for his review of AEW Dynamite.
Hello, I'm Tempest, and I have not slept since returning to Canada at 6:30 a.m. yesterday. This is my review of AEW Dynamite in about 5 minutes. Let's tackle 2025. We kick things off immediately. I've got a sugar rush. I can't imagine why. Blah, blah, blah. I can't even say that right. This was a mistake. We kick things off with in-ring action like a Dynamite of old as Will Ospreay beat Buddy Matthews. This was very evenly matched as the two were even on the same page, both hitting a double cross body for a double down at one point. One of my favorite things in this match was how Buddy cut off Will's comeback. He didn't hit a sick-ass move on the apron or some driver or brainbuster. He just shoved Will off of the apron into the announce table. It was very simple and effective and did more to get the people behind Will than to get Buddy cheered, and I like that. Very effective. Ospreay got the win with the hidden blade after giving a round of applause to Buddy, and then Will told Buddy afterwards that he and Brody don't need to follow anyone and can win gold on their own, and if he ever needs a hand, Will is happy to be his buddy. Wait a minute. Given that this news times up very well with the reports of Malachi Black's potential departure from AEW, we might be seeing a new United Empire alongside Will. Brody King and Will Ospreay on the same unit. That's a pretty stacked duo. After a recap of Wrestle Dynasty, we had a championship celebration with Private Party. They didn't get much of a reaction coming out, and I really do feel bad for these lads. They won those tag titles 3 months ago. I know this is 6, but 3 months ago, and they have done diddly dick with them. They were interrupted by the Hurt Syndicate, who at first seemed to join the celebration, but then MVP told Bobby Lashley to make a toast, and he toasted to the next tag team champions, the Hurt Syndicate. Bobby then went to the ring for our next match against Mark Briscoe, but man, I tell you, the tag title scene is so deep in the mud at this point that it has embedded itself within the Earth's crust. As for the match, Mark sold for a very long time, taking a flat back bump off the apron that would have shortened an average man's career, but not his. Mark used a chair while the referee was distracted, which gave him his only flurry of offense of the match, which Bobby kicked out of at 1 to virtually no reaction, and then beat Mark with a spear and the Hurt Lock before Private Party made the save. The Hurt Syndicate vying for the tag titles is something I'm interested in seeing, but I am begging you guys to make Private Party seem even the slightest bit important so that a potential title change can mean more. It has been months. I need good tag wrestling like I need oxygen, and I'm Terry Funk. I've been suffocating out here. This will hereby be the first and last time that Tempest ever refers to himself as Terry Funk, so as not to disrespect one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. We then had a match that I'm sure Terry Funk had a lot of in his career, as the Casino Gauntlet match for the AEW World Title shot for next week was up next. Jay White started first, as was his right, but then Hangman Page came out second. They jabbered about losing at World's End and countered finishers, and then Wheeler Yuta was third, who immediately was hit with a Blade Runner for a great near fall. Next was meant to be Swerve, who would have gone face to face with Hangman, but then it was revealed it was actually Ricochet, who came out with a "what of it" sort of attitude. Ricochet and Wheeler got the heat on Page and White, and then it was Adam Cole who quickly found Ricochet so he could super kick him out of midair. Then it was time for Daniel Garcia to come out and gather Cole, Page, and White into the corner and play whack-a-mole with them. Garcia and Yuta came face to face, which was fun to see for your fans of 2022 Ring of Honor, or, if you prefer, your fans of 2021 Independent Wrestling. Hobbs was up next, who immediately launched Ricochet out of the ring and ran wild with his powerhouseness. Then it was Roddy Strong, who honestly just joined the crew, and then Lance Archer, who ran wild with his taller houseness. Coin it, put it on a t-shirt. You'll sell maybe 2. And then it was Kyle O'Reilly, who entered as a member of the Conglomeration and not the Undisputed Kingdom. Did I miss something here? Was there a secret fucking epilogue of this godforsaken storyline that I subconsciously chose to skip? And then our final entrant, Jeff Jarrett, made his entrance only to get jumped, which allowed Will Hobbs to hit the spinebuster and get the pin. After the match, Hobbs was asked what this meant to him, and he said Moxley brought him into AEW. Next week, he's gonna make Mox his bitch. I do like that there is some story to pull from here between Mox and Hobbs, whether it be their early going pandemic days in AEW, or more recently, just last year, when Hobbs got hurt fighting Jon Moxley. I think there's about a snowball's chance in hell that Will Hobbs wins the AEW World title next week, but at the very least, I like to see him getting an AEW World title shot if it means climbing that corporate ladder. Then Jeff Jarrett walked back to the ring and was asked about losing only to be interrupted by MJF. Now this did perk my ears up because I simply like when new combinations of wrestlers are put together. MJF came out in a suit, which means he was not waiting in Gorilla to be next in the gauntlet match, but rather he cut a long promo talking about the career of Jeff Jarrett and revealed Double J only signed a 1-year contract because that was all pro wrestling had left to offer him. But if he wants to be world champion, MJF will help him in exchange for the first shot. Jeff took the mic and rejected Max's offer, saying Max could have entered the gauntlet but wanted the easiest route to the title possible. I don't know about a long-term MJF Jeff Jarrett program personally, but a match at like Grand Slam, maybe another at the end of the year, yeah, I can pick that up. I don't know, maybe I'm just excited to see MJF involved with someone not named Adam Cole. Baby. Then we had Cope. Not gonna get used to this one. Took me a year to get used to saying Adam Copeland, and now you're gonna go ahead and change your name again? You're lucky I love you, but I'm coping hard. God damn it. He said that Hangman, Switchblade, Orange, they didn't have what it took to survive the grind of being champion. And he doesn't like saying it, but challenges anyone to find someone who has gone more than he has just to stand there. Said he's broken his neck in a match with Eddie Guerrero and he won. Said he broke his leg against Malachi Black and he still won. So he asks Moxley what he could possibly do to him that no one has done before. Death Riders brawl with Cope and FTR, and then Hobbs made the save when they were going to suffocate Cope with the plastic bag. Now this is tough. I think Cope is an all-timer at being able to produce a top-notch segment that can sell you on whatever match he's selling, and I do think he did a good job with that here, but it just feels like every single person around is checked out of this Moxley reign. So in a better time, I'd have loved the AEW main event run of Cope. Maybe I still will. I hope so. Mariah May and Harley Cameron had a fun backstage deal because Harley Cameron has only one setting and it is fun. They're having a non-title match on Collision this week. Then we had a 3-way for the #1 spot in next week's Women's Casino Gauntlet match as Toni Storm, Chris Statlander, and Willow Nightingale gave us a very fun match that was so star-studded, it almost felt like a mistake. Like, how dare this match be this cool? Women's matches on Dynamite are meant to be 6 minutes with only one person who could ever possibly win. Anywho, Willow hit Toni Storm with a slingshot right into Chris Statlander's cooch in what was the greatest spot of 2025. Close the year right there, we're done, folks. Toni wrestled like a spry newcomer. She really liked doing snapmare takedowns. And as someone who has done some wrestling training myself, I like doing them too. I understand it. This was very fun, and eventually Willow was dumped out of the ring and Chris Stat hit Wednesday Night Fever on Toni for the win. The crowd didn't seem into the finish. Maybe they just got their third option. Maybe Chris Stat has just lost a lot of matches lately. But despite the lack of reaction, this was a very fun match and much more of what I would like to see on Dynamite from the women's division. Backstage, Toni is sad she lost and told Renee she just isn't ready yet. Can someone ask Toni Storm what year it is for me and what the last year and a half of her life was like? Was she building orphanages in Mexico too? Eventually the world will have enough orphanages thanks to the wrestlers who usually are never seen again. Shout out to the GOATs, Prince Puma and El Generico. But then it was time for the return we waited all of 2024 to see. Kenny Omega, the god of pro wrestling, Winnipeg's greatest export, returned with new music in hand to let us all know that life is not worth living without the people cheering him on in the ring. And he was interrupted by Don Callis, but Kenny made a mad dash to beat Don's ass. Brian Cage and Lance Archer were Don's backup, and they and Kyle Fletcher beat Kenny until Will Ospreay made the save. The record is 1-1, lads, and now with both men in the same promotion, a third match between those two could have literally anything happen, and I can't wait to see it. That needs to be a match for the AEW World Championship at some point in the next year. And that was Dynamite. Overall, I thought that the content of this week's episode was pretty good despite a less than hot crowd, while I still do have my issues with AEW in general. The wrestling was quite good. We had some new dynamics to freshen things up, and of course we got him back. at long last, and with his AEW return match against Brian Cage to look forward to next week. So there were definitely highlights of this show, but unfortunately a lot of the things that should be at the forefront of this promotion right now, the women's title, the tag titles, the world title, either aren't focused on enough or just haven't turned out to be that interesting. This episode of Dynamite gets a 4 out of 5. But before I go, make sure you check out the first episode of Video Game League over on Control Freaks, where I am making it my mission to be known as the greatest Mario Man in the world that is contained within these offices.